The captain's voice cut through the cabin like a blade. Every head in business class turned at once. The air seemed to tighten, as if the plane itself had drawn a breath and was holding it.
Get out of that seat now!
Where are you headed?
The man in 3A didn't flinch. He sat motionless, one hand resting on the armrest, the other on a closed canvas briefcase tucked neatly at his feet. His name was Marcus Hayes, and in that moment, half the cabin decided he didn't belong where he was sitting. He was in his mid-50s, hair graying at the temples, no jewelry worth noticing, no designer logos announcing status. A navy hoodie, worn jeans, white sneakers that had seen better years. The kind of outfit people wore when they expected to work, not be seen. To the captain standing over him, tall and broad-shouldered in a crisp uniform, he looked like an inconvenience that should have known better.
I said, get out of the seat!
The captain's voice climbed louder.
This aircraft is about to depart.
The overhead bins hummed softly as they locked. Somewhere farther back, a baby cried, then went quiet. A flight attendant froze mid-step near the galley, her fingers tightening around a stack of safety cards. Another attendant avoided looking at anyone at all. Eyes pressed into his back, his shoulders, the base of his neck. Something steadier, colder settled beneath the scrutiny. The familiar sensation of being measured, judged, dismissed before he had spoken a single word. He looked up at the captain's face, close enough now to see the thin red vein pulsing at his temple, to hear the edge in his breathing.
Sir, this is my assigned seat.
His voice was level, not defiant, not apologetic. Steady in a way that unsettled people who expected fear. The captain let out a short, humorless laugh. Not today, it isn't. You're holding up departure. Gather your things. A man across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. He glanced at Marcus, then at the captain, then down at his phone as if the screen might offer instructions on what kind of person he was supposed to be in this moment. 2 rows back, an older woman pressed her lips together, eyes narrowed, memorizing every detail. Marcus reached into his hoodie pocket and slid his boarding pass onto the armrest between them. It lay there plainly. Business class. Seat confirmed. No confusion. No error. If there's an operational issue, I'm happy to cooperate, but I'll need to understand the reason. The captain didn't look at the boarding pass. He didn't need to. His jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck rising like cables. You don't need to understand anything. This is a crew matter. Crew matter. 2 words, vague and flexible. A phrase designed to end conversations without explaining anything at all. Behind him, the young flight attendant swallowed hard. Her name tag read Emily. She had been the one sent over first, voice shaking as she passed along an instruction she knew was wrong, but did not feel powerful enough to question. Fear flickered in her eyes. Calculation. The silent prayer not to be noticed. Marcus looked past the captain, caught Emily's gaze for just a second. No anger there. Only recognition. Years ago, he'd stood where she stood now, between authority and conscience, crushed by both. Sir, Marcus said again, softer this time. If you're asking me to give up a seat I paid for, I'll need that request documented. That was when the captain leaned in. People like you always want documentation. His voice dropped, almost conversational, like a truth he felt entitled to share. Always want to make things complicated. The words landed hard, not shouted, not dramatic, delivered low, precise, like a scalpel. A ripple moved through the cabin. A few people inhaled sharply. Someone in the back whispered something under their breath. Marcus's fingers curled once against the armrest. Heat rose, then settled, locked down behind years of discipline. He had learned long ago that anger, when wasted, only served the people who provoked it. "Please step back. You're standing too close." The captain straightened, color creeping into his face. He turned slightly, angling his body so the rest of the cabin could see him, so they could see who was in control. "This passenger is refusing a lawful crew instruction. If he continues, he will be removed from the aircraft." Removed. The word echoed, heavy, final. Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose. Around him, the cabin held its breath again. He could feel the judgment forming, the stories writing themselves in strangers' minds. Difficult, non-compliant, problem passenger. And then, through the galley entrance, a young man appeared. 29 years old, white, wearing a Supreme hoodie that cost $800, Air Jordan sneakers gleaming like they'd never touched pavement. A Rolex Daytona caught the overhead light, $45,000 on his wrist. He carried a Louis Vuitton duffel and moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "Yo, Captain Rick! Uncle John said you got me!" The captain's posture shifted. "Evan, have a seat. I'm handling something." Evan looked at Marcus, then at the seat. "That dude in my seat?" "He's moving. Give me a second." Evan stepped closer, impatience bleeding through. "Bro, just move. That's my seat." Marcus remained seated, said nothing, returned his attention to his laptop. Evan's voice rose. "Yo, old man, you deaf? I'm talking to you." Marcus looked up. His voice stayed level. "I'm not moving without documentation." "Documentation? Here's your documentation." Evan snapped his fingers in Marcus's face, then shoved his shoulder. Not hard, but deliberate. Visible. Marcus didn't shove back. He simply stood, slowly, and looked at the young man with the same unwavering composure he'd shown everyone else. "You just committed battery. That's on camera." He gestured to the 5 phones now openly recording. The captain's voice rose. "That's it. Emily, call security. We have a non-compliant passenger." Emily's hands shook as she reached for the phone. Marcus picked up his briefcase and stood. "I will walk. I won't be dragged. But I want this logged. Captain Coleman removed me without documented cause to give my seat to this gentleman. I want names, badge numbers, timestamp." The captain grabbed a notepad and scrawled on it, angry and fast. "Richard Coleman, Captain. Serial number TC4782. Satisfied?" Marcus pulled out his phone and began recording. Coleman lunged forward and snatched it from his hand. "You will not record on my aircraft." Marcus's voice dropped, cold and precise. "You just committed battery and theft in front of 47 witnesses, all of whom are recording." He gestured to the cabin. At least a dozen phones were pointed directly at them. 2 security officers appeared at the aircraft door, one male, one female, both professional, unreadable. "Sir, we need you to come with us." Marcus nodded. He walked down the aisle, spine straight, eyes forward. The security officers flanked him but didn't touch, sensing he would comply without force. As he passed row 5, a black man leaned out slightly. "Stay strong, brother." Marcus nodded once. At the jet bridge entrance, he paused, looked back. Coleman stood in the doorway, chest heaving. Their eyes met across the length of the aircraft. Marcus spoke one final time, voice barely above a whisper, but perfectly clear. "You just made a very serious mistake." Coleman's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. The jet bridge door closed with a hollow thud. 3 hours earlier, the alarm went off at 5:30 in a bedroom that smelled of fresh coffee brewing downstairs. Marcus woke before it sounded, habit carved into him by decades of early mornings, and lay still for a moment, listening to his wife Rachel breathe beside him. The house was modest, a 3-bedroom ranch in a Chicago suburb where lawns were mowed on Saturdays and neighbors waved from driveways. The mortgage had been paid off 6 years ago. The Toyota Camry in the garage was a 2015 model, silver paint dulled by winter salt. Marcus dressed in the bathroom, gray hoodie, Levi's jeans, white Nikes worn soft. He shaved, rinsed his face, stared at the mirror. 54 years looked back. Lines at the corners of his eyes, a scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood fall he barely remembered. He looked ordinary, unremarkable, exactly as intended. Downstairs, Rachel sat at the kitchen table, coffee mug cradled in both hands. She smiled when he appeared. "You still didn't upgrade to first class." Marcus poured himself coffee. Black, no sugar. "Business class is fine." "You can afford first class, Marcus. You've been doing this job for 20 years. 22. And I don't need first class. Business gets me there just the same." Rachel studied him. "One of these days, you're going to let yourself enjoy something." "I enjoy this coffee." He took a sip to prove it. His phone buzzed, video call from their son David, 26, mechanical engineer in Phoenix, wearing a t-shirt advertising a band Marcus had never heard of. "Hey Dad, San Diego today?" Marcus propped the phone against the sugar bowl. "Just a meeting. Back tomorrow night." "Conference about those new passenger rights rules?" "Something like that." David grinned. "You're being vague, which means boring federal stuff." "Boring federal stuff I'm contractually obligated not to explain." They talked for 5 minutes about turbine efficiency and design tolerances. When the call ended, Rachel was watching him. "You love that boy." "I do." "And you're proud of him." "Every day." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Then maybe stop pretending you don't care about nice things. David turned out fine, and you flew economy his whole childhood." Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "He turned out fine because we taught him that people matter more than things." "True, but you can teach that lesson and still sit in a comfortable seat." He didn't argue. Rachel knew him well enough to understand why he dressed the way he did, why he drove a car older than most colleagues' children, why he insisted on blending into backgrounds. She didn't agree with all of it, but she understood. At 6:15, Marcus walked through O'Hare's automatic doors, canvas briefcase over one shoulder, boarding pass on his phone. The terminal hummed. Rolling suitcases, announcements, coffee kiosks not yet open. He joined the check-in line behind a family with 3 children. When he reached the counter, the agent looked up, scanned his phone, and paused. Her eyes flicked from screen to Marcus, then back. A micro-expression of doubt. "Mr. Hayes, is this your ticket?" "Yes, ma'am." She scanned again. "This was purchased yesterday for $1,847. Business class." "That's correct. And you paid with a government card?" Marcus kept his voice level. "Department of Transportation. Official business." The agent's fingers hovered over her keyboard. Uncertainty flickered across her face. "Just a moment, please." She picked up a phone, spoke briefly to someone Marcus couldn't see, then printed his boarding pass with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Here you are, Mr. Hayes. Gate C-17. Have a good flight." He took the pass and moved toward security. At the TSA checkpoint, an agent pulled his bag aside for additional screening. The briefcase was unpacked with methodical slowness. Laptop, file folders, pens, a granola bar, everything examined, swabbed, repacked. "Traveling for business?" "Yes." "What kind of business?" "Government work." "What kind of government work?" Marcus met the agent's eyes. The kind that requires me to catch this flight. The agent held his gaze for a beat, longer than necessary, then zipped the briefcase closed and handed it back. You're all set. Safe trip. Marcus walked toward gate C-17, passing newsstands and coffee shops. He found a seat near the window, opened his laptop, pulled up the file he'd been reviewing for 3 weeks. The document was 47 pages, data compiled from 2 years of passenger complaints organized by airline, route, demographic. Transcontinental Airways. 43 complaints filed with the DOT Civil Rights Office. 38 involved passengers of color removed from flights for reasons listed as crew discretion, operational necessity, or non-compliance. 0 documented safety incidents. 0 evidence of actual operational issues. Just a long, steady stream of people told they didn't belong where they'd paid to be. Marcus had investigated this before. Every time, airlines settled quietly. Vouchers, apologies, promises. Nothing changed. This time, he was going to change it. The meeting in San Diego wasn't just a conference. It was the final step before recommending a full federal audit, backed by enforcement authority that couldn't be bought off. Boarding began at 6:35. Marcus waited until his zone was called, then joined the line. The gate agent barely glanced at his pass. The flight attendants offered mechanical smiles. He found 3A easily, window seat, 3rd row. Stowed his briefcase, settled in, pulled out his laptop. The cabin smelled of recycled air and lemon cleaner. A voice broke his concentration. Welcome aboard, sir. Can I get you anything before takeoff? The flight attendant was young, mid-20s, blonde hair and a tight bun. Name tag, Emily Watson. Smile polite but fragile. Water, please. Thank you, Emily. She blinked, surprised. Most passengers didn't read name tags. She nodded and disappeared, returning with water and a napkin folded into a triangle. Marcus thanked her and returned to his screen. A spreadsheet showing seat reassignments over 18 months. The numbers told a story that would make any reasonable person uncomfortable. At 6:40, a phone rang somewhere forward. Sharp. Insistent. Marcus glanced up. Captain Coleman emerged from the cockpit, phone pressed to his ear. Tall, broad-shouldered, confident in the way that came from decades of being obeyed without question. He spoke briefly, too quietly to hear, then ended the call and stood in the aisle, scanning business class with focused intensity. His gaze landed on Marcus, lingered, took in the hoodie, the jeans, the canvas briefcase, then moved to the empty seat beside Marcus before shifting to 3B across the aisle, where a man in an expensive suit read the Wall Street Journal. Coleman's jaw tightened. He walked back into the cockpit. Marcus returned to his laptop, though some part of his mind remained alert. 2 minutes later, the young man appeared, breathless, grinning. 29. Supreme hoodie worth more than Marcus's entire outfit. Air Jordans pristine, Rolex gleaming, Louis Vuitton duffel that looked like it had never touched a floor. The gate agent followed, apologetic. I'm sorry, Captain Coleman said to send him up. The young man didn't wait. He strolled in like he owned it. Yo, Captain Rick hooked it up. Emily appeared from the galley, confusion flickering. Sir, your seat assignment is... It's cool. Uncle John cleared it. Uncle John? Jonathan Cole, board member. He called ahead. Emily's face went pale. She glanced toward the cockpit, then at the young man, then at Marcus. In that instant, Marcus understood exactly what was about to happen. Coleman emerged again, walked directly to Marcus's row, stopped in the aisle, body blocking the view from most of the cabin. Sir, I need you to move to another seat. Marcus looked up slowly, closed his laptop with deliberate care. Good morning, Captain. Is there a safety issue? This is an operational matter. Please gather your things and move to 12C. Marcus didn't move. Captain, I'm in my assigned seat. Could you specify the operational necessity? Coleman's expression hardened. I don't need to specify anything. This is my aircraft. I'm instructing you to move. Marcus pulled out his phone, opened the airline app, checked the seat map. 12C was a middle seat, economy, wedged between two passengers. He looked back at Coleman. 12C is in economy. I paid $1,847 for this business class seat. Federal Regulation 14 CFR 250.2 requires documented cause for involuntary downgrade. I'm asking for that documentation. Coleman's jaw muscles flexed. Are you a lawyer? I know my rights. People like you always think you know better than the crew. Marcus kept his voice calm. Captain Coleman, I'm asking politely. If there's a legitimate operational reason, I will move, but I need it documented. Coleman turned, called over his shoulder. Emily, get security, non-compliant passenger. Emily's hands shook as she reached for the phone. Evan was still standing in the aisle, amusement and impatience mixing on his face. He looked at Marcus, shook his head. Bro, just move. That's my seat. Marcus didn't respond, remained seated, hands folded. Evan's voice climbed. Yo, old man, you deaf? Marcus looked up. I'm not moving without documentation. Documentation? Here's your documentation. Evan snapped his fingers in Marcus's face, then shoved his shoulder. Marcus didn't shove back. He stood, slowly, deliberately, looked at Evan with the same calm he'd given everyone else. You just committed battery. That's on camera. He gestured to the phones now recording. The cabin had gone silent. Passengers leaned into aisles. At least a dozen phones pointed at them. A woman in row 1 made a soft sound of disapproval. Oh, for heaven's sake, just move. You're holding everyone up. A black man in row 4 shook his head, whispered something to his wife. 2 security officers appeared, dark uniforms, radios clipped to shoulders. Coleman gestured them forward. This passenger is refusing a lawful crew instruction. I need him removed. The male officer approached. Sir, the captain has asked you to move. Are you refusing? Marcus looked at him, then at Coleman, then at the phones recording every word. I am not refusing. I am asking for documentation of the operational necessity that requires my removal from a seat I paid for. That is my legal right under federal aviation regulations. The officer hesitated, glanced at Coleman. Captain, is there a documented operational issue? Coleman's face flushed. The operational issue is his non-compliance. But what was the original reason for asking him to move? Coleman didn't answer. In that silence, Evan stepped forward. Man, fuck this! He reached out and shoved Marcus's shoulder again, harder this time. Marcus didn't shove back, simply stood. Coleman's voice rose. That's it. Officers, remove him, now. The female officer stepped forward, tone gentler. Sir, please come with us. Marcus picked up his briefcase. I will walk. I won't be dragged. He looked at Coleman one last time. But I want this logged. Captain Richard Coleman removed me without documented cause to give my seat to this gentleman. I want names, badge numbers, timestamp. Coleman grabbed a notepad, scrawled on it with sharp, angry strokes. Richard Coleman, Captain. Serial number TC4782. Satisfied? Marcus pulled out his phone, began recording. Coleman lunged forward, snatched it from his hand. "You will not record on my aircraft!" Marcus's voice dropped, cold, precise. "You just committed battery and theft in front of 47 witnesses, all of whom are recording." He gestured to the cabin, phones everywhere. Coleman's hand, gripping Marcus's phone, trembled. The officers exchanged a glance. "Captain, we should probably get him off this plane." Marcus walked down the aisle, spine straight, eyes forward. Security flanked him but didn't touch. As he passed row 5, the black man leaned out. "Stay strong, brother." Marcus nodded once. At the jet bridge entrance, he paused, looked back. Coleman stood in the doorway, chest heaving, face flushed. Their eyes met. Marcus spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "You just made a very serious mistake." The jet bridge door closed. Marcus set his phone on his lap and opened the brochure Jessica had given him. Dense paragraphs of regulatory language interspersed with reassurances that Transcontinental valued every customer and took all complaints seriously. He'd seen 100 versions. He'd investigated the systems behind them. A passenger filed a complaint. Customer service reviewed it. If it mentioned race, disability, religion, anything creating legal exposure, it got forwarded to a specialist who offered compensation in exchange for signing a release waiving further action. Most people accepted. A voucher and apology felt like acknowledgement, even when they were just mechanisms to make problems disappear. Marcus had spent 2 years trying to change that system from inside regulatory apparatus. Memos, presentations, enforcement recommendations softened into consent agreements, softened into voluntary compliance programs that changed nothing. Airlines paid small fines, updated training materials, kept doing exactly what they'd always done, because settling complaints was cheaper than fixing the culture generating them. Now he was going to force the issue in a way that couldn't be settled with a voucher. Meanwhile, Flight 814, 35,000 feet. Evan Cole shifted in seat 3A and tried to pretend his phone wasn't self-destructing in real time. The champagne sat untouched on the tray table, condensation pooling around the base. His Instagram post from 20 minutes ago, selfie with champagne, caption about first-class life, had accumulated 417 comments. Not one was congratulatory. "Bro, did you seriously push that guy?" "This you? https://twitter.com/ Congrats on being famous for the worst reason. Your uncle must be so proud." Evan scrolled faster, thumb moving with frantic energy, hoping the next screen would somehow be different. It wasn't. The video had spread beyond Twitter into Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, places he didn't know existed until he saw his own face staring back. In every version, he looked worse. The shove, the smirk, the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been told no. His phone buzzed. Uncle Jonathan. Evan's thumb hovered over decline, then accepted. "Uncle John, I can explain." "Shut up. Do not say another word. Do not post anything. Do not talk to anyone. Understand?" Evan's throat tightened. "Yeah, but—" "I said shut up. I'm dealing with lawyers right now because of you. Because you couldn't wait 2 hours for a regular flight." "You said to call if I needed—" "I didn't say to assault someone on camera, Evan. Do you have any idea what this is costing me? What it's already cost?" Evan looked out at clouds stretching to the horizon. "I barely touched him." The silence was worse than yelling. When Jonathan spoke again, his voice had gone cold and flat. "The man you barely touched is a federal commissioner investigating our airline for discrimination. You shoved him.
on camera, in front of 47 witnesses, while taking his seat. Do you understand what that means?
Something dropped in Evan's stomach. Elevator cable snapping. A federal what? Commissioner, Department of Transportation, Civil Rights Division. He's been investigating us for 2 years, and you just handed him everything he needs to destroy us. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. You don't know anything because you don't think. You just expect the world to give you what you want because it always has. The line went dead. Evan stared at his phone, at the black screen reflecting his face. He opened Twitter, searched Federal Commissioner plane. First result: DOT Commissioner removed from flight after refusing to give up seat. FBI investigating. He clicked, read 3 paragraphs, stopped when he saw his name. The passenger who took Commissioner Hayes' seat has been identified as Evan Cole, nephew of Transcontinental Airways board member Jonathan Cole. Video shows the younger Cole shoving Hayes before removal. The FBI has indicated both Coles may face questioning. Evan closed his eyes and leaned back against leather that suddenly felt less like luxury and more like evidence. 2 rows behind, Emily Watson stood in the galley, refilling ice bins with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She'd watched it happen, been ordered to participate, followed Coleman's instructions because she was 3 weeks into a job she needed and couldn't afford to lose. Now she was trapped at 35,000 feet with the knowledge that she'd been complicit in something all over the news, and there was nothing she could do except keep serving drinks and smiling and pretending everything was fine. Her phone was in her purse in the crew compartment, turned off per regulations. She knew what was waiting when she landed. Her roommate had texted earlier, she'd seen it before takeoff, saying something about a video. Emily hadn't had time to look. Now she was afraid to. The senior flight attendant, Margaret, appeared beside her, tight-lipped expression of someone delivering unwelcome news. Emily, when we land, don't talk to media. Don't post anything on social media. Corporate sending someone to debrief the crew. Emily's hands stilled on the ice scoop. Am I in trouble? Margaret's face softened slightly. I don't know yet. Coleman is, and anyone who helped him is going to get asked a lot of questions. I just did what he told me. I know. Write down everything you remember, every word, every detail. You're going to need it. Emily nodded and went back to the ice, scooping and dumping with mechanical precision, while her mind replayed Coleman telling her to ask the passenger in 3A for his boarding pass. The way Marcus had looked up, calm and polite, handing it over without question. The way she'd taken it back to Coleman, who'd glanced at it and said, "Tell him he needs to move." When she'd hesitated, Coleman had leaned close. You're still on probation, Emily. Probation cuts both ways. She'd been too afraid to refuse. Now she was too afraid of what refusing might have saved her from. In the cockpit, Coleman flew the aircraft with mechanical precision, forcing his mind to focus on nothing except airspeed and altitude and waypoints. His first officer sat in the right seat, running through approach preparations, occasionally glancing at Coleman with uncertain expression, someone who'd witnessed something they didn't fully understand, but knew was wrong. Coleman's phone was in his flight bag behind his seat, turned off, completely unaware of the digital firestorm building since gate C-17. He'd handled hundreds of passenger disputes over 30 years. Some complained, most accepted it and moved on. That's how it worked. That's how it had always worked. He had no idea this time was different, that the man he'd removed wasn't just another passenger. That video had been viewed 6 million times. that his name was being mentioned alongside federal investigation and civil rights violation and potential criminal charges. He adjusted headings slightly and thought about the incident report he'd file. Passenger refused crew instruction, became argumentative, created delay, removed for non-compliance. Standard language, clean and simple. It wouldn't be enough. But he didn't know that yet. Meanwhile, Jonathan Cole's office, downtown Chicago. 300 miles behind the aircraft, in a corner office on the 42nd floor, Jonathan Cole sat across from two attorneys who'd arrived so fast he suspected they'd been waiting for this call for years. The older one, Patricia Grayson, had silver hair cut short and eyes that missed nothing. The younger one, Michael Torres, took notes on yellow legal pad with handwriting so precise it looked like fought. Let me be very clear. Patricia's voice was level, clinical. The FBI is investigating potential abuse of your position as board member to influence crew decisions resulting in civil rights violations against a federal official. If they prove you knowingly used authority for personal benefit, causing discriminatory harm, you're looking at federal charges. Jonathan's hands were flat on the desk, palms down, holding himself still through sheer will. I made a phone call asking Coleman to hold the door for my nephew who was running late. That's not illegal. It's not the call that's illegal. It's what happened because of the call. Did you tell Coleman which seat to give Evan? No. Did you suggest he should move someone? I asked if there were any available seats in business class. Patricia exchanged a glance with Michael, who made a note. And what did Coleman say? He said he'd handle it. Did you know he was going to remove another passenger? Jonathan hesitated. Patricia leaned forward. Jonathan, I need you to understand something. The man Coleman removed is Marcus Hayes. He's been investigating transcontinental seat assignment practices for 2 years. He has data on 847 incidents. Your phone call just became Exhibit A in a pattern of discrimination that's going to cost this company hundreds of millions, maybe billions when the stock settles. Jonathan pulled up NASDAQ on his computer. TCAI, $116.22, down 8.8%. Volume, 22 million shares. He'd owned 43,000 shares since his board appointment 15 years ago. This morning, they'd been worth $5.4 million. Now, $4.9 million, and dropping. This is insane. I was helping my nephew. You were using your position to benefit family at another passenger's expense. The fact that passenger is a federal commissioner investigating exactly this behavior makes it exponentially worse. Michael looked up. Mr. Cole, have you made similar requests before? Asked crew to accommodate friends, family, business associates? Jonathan didn't answer. The silence stretched. Patricia closed her eyes briefly. Resignation. She already knew. I want immunity before I answer that. Patricia shook her head. You're not getting immunity. You're a board member, not a witness. What you are going to get is a subpoena, and under oath, lying becomes federal crime on top of everything else. So I'm asking now, before we get there, how many times? Jonathan looked out the window at the city sprawling below, buildings and streets and people who had no idea that 42 floors above, a man was calculating whether honesty or silence would destroy him faster. Maybe a dozen times over the years? Friends, clients, family. Nothing unusual. Everyone does it. Michael stopped writing. Everyone on the board? I don't know. I assume so. Patricia stood, walked to the window, hands clasped behind her back. The FBI is going to request board communications.
Every email, every text, every phone log. If there's evidence of a pattern of board members using influence to manipulate seat assignments, this goes from bad to catastrophic.
What am I supposed to do?
Resign from the board before you're asked. Cooperate with the investigation
And hope prosecutors decide your cooperation is worth more than your conviction. Jonathan's phone buzzed. His wife. He ignored it. Buzzed again. His daughter. Ignored. Third time. Text from a friend. Just saw the news. Are you okay? He wasn't okay. But admitting that felt like accepting defeat. Meanwhile, Transcontinental Headquarters. 17 miles away, a team of 6 people sat around a conference table covered with laptops, tablets, printouts of tweets and articles, and stock charts. The head of public relations, Karen Stevens, stood at a whiteboard listing action items in blue marker. "Where are we on Coleman?" Junior analyst looked up. "Suspended with pay pending investigation. Union filed grievance. Legal says we're solid given circumstances." "Emily Watson?" Flight attendant who approached passenger first. "Still airborne. Someone's meeting her when she lands for statement." "Jonathan Cole?" Silence. Karen set down the marker. "Anyone?" Harper's executive assistant spoke carefully. "Mr. Cole retained private counsel. He's not responding to internal communications." Karen wrote Cole, legal, and underlined twice. "Great. So we have a radioactive board member, a captain probably getting charged, and a federal commissioner who went on live television to tell the world we're running a discrimination ring. What's our media strategy?" Aaron Kim, head of corporate communications, had been typing variations of the same press release for an hour. Apologize, commit to investigation, promise reform. We can't defend what happened, so we acknowledge it, take responsibility, pivot to action. Action like what? Independent review of crew discretion policies, external audit of seat assignments, mandatory anti-discrimination training, passenger rights office reporting directly to DOT. Karen stared at him. Those are the exact recommendations from Hayes' preliminary investigation that legal said we could push back on. Legal doesn't get to decide anymore. The market does. And the market just erased $1 billion because investors think we're a civil rights lawsuit waiting to explode. Karen's phone rang. Harper. She answered on speaker. "Dan, you're on with the crisis team." Harper's voice came through tight, controlled. "I just landed. I met with Hayes at the airport. He's smart, angry, and has every intention of turning this into a test case, reshaping the entire industry." "Where are we on damage control?" "Drafting statements. But anything we say gets parsed by federal investigators, plaintiffs' attorneys, shareholders already spooked. Legal needs to approve every word." "How long?" 6 hours minimum." "We don't have 6 hours. Every minute we're silent, the narrative hardens. Get me something in 2 hours that acknowledges what happened, commits to cooperation, announces immediate policy changes. I don't care if legal hates it. Public statement goes out in 2 hours." "Dan, if we commit to policy changes now, then we're ahead of enforcement actions coming anyway." "Karen, this isn't about winning. It's about losing less badly than if we fight." The call ended. Karen turned back to the whiteboard, wrote in large letters, "Statement, 2 hours." Underneath, premise, "We failed. We know it. We're fixing it." Aaron was already typing. Pulling language from United's Dow response. Similar situation, different specifics. That response got torn apart. Because they waited too long and went defensive first. We're going immediate and contrite. Different strategy. Karen sat down, pulled her laptop closer, opened a blank document. "All right,
Let's write the statement that costs us the least amount of everything.
Meanwhile, Marcus at O'Hare. Marcus pulled out his laptop and the file he'd been reviewing for 3 weeks. 47 pages of data compiled from 2 years of passenger complaints. Transcontinental Airways, 43 complaints. 38 involved passengers of color removed from flights for crew discretion, operational necessity, or non-compliance. 0 documented safety incidents. 0 evidence of actual operational issues. Just a long, steady stream of people told they didn't belong where they'd paid to be. Through the window, Flight 814 pushed back from the gate. The aircraft pivoted, nose swinging toward taxiway, lights blinking in sequence. Inside that cabin, Evan was probably settling into 3A. Coleman in the cockpit, running pre-flight checks, convinced he'd handled the problem efficiently. Neither knew what was about to happen. Marcus's phone buzzed. Text from James. Protocol initiated. FAA notified. Corporate compliance notified. FBI. Chicago sending agents to O'Hare. ETA. 30 minutes. Second text. Stock already moving. Someone leaked. Marcus opened browser. NASDAQ page. TCAI. Previous close, $127.50. Pre-market, $124. Volume triple normal. He refreshed. $123.20. Somewhere, someone with real-time social media monitoring had seen the video and decided to sell. Others following. Algorithms parsing keywords, calculating risk, executing thousands of trades per second. Marcus refreshed again. $122.15. The terminal continued its rhythm. Family queuing at Starbucks, businessman jogging past, phone to ear. Elderly couple watching CNN with sound muted. None knew that 20 feet away, a man had just triggered a chain reaction that would be studied in business schools for years. Jessica appeared again, tentative. Mr. Hayes, I've spoken with my supervisor. We can confirm you on 9:30 departure, seat 2A, business class. Full refund of original ticket plus the voucher. Additionally, complimentary lounge access and meal credit. Would that be acceptable? Marcus looked up from his laptop. Did Captain Coleman file an incident report documenting the operational necessity requiring my removal? Jessica's smile wavered. I don't have access to crew reports, but I'm sure... Then the answer is no. I'll wait for the formal complaint process. Jessica's professionalism cracked. Frustration bled through. Sir, I'm trying to help. This route is very popular. If you're not on 9:30, next available business class isn't until 6 tonight. I'd hate for you to miss your meeting. I appreciate the concern. I'll wait. Jessica nodded and retreated. Picked up phone, spoke briefly, hung up. Began typing with aggressive speed, forwarding a problem to a superior. Marcus's phone rang. Rachel. He answered. Hey. Marcus, what happened? David just sent me a link to a video. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, exhaled, opened them, focused on the taxiway where Flight 814 was third in line for departure. I'm fine. There was an incident. I'm handling it. An incident? Marcus, the video shows you being forced off a plane. Are you hurt? I'm not hurt. Then what happened? He told her. Facts stripped of emotional weight. Rachel listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet. Then, you're going to use this, aren't you? I'm going to document it. Marcus. Her voice softened. Not sympathy, understanding. You've been investigating this airline for 2 years. You've been trying to build a case, and now you're part of the evidence. I didn't plan this. I know.
But you're not going to walk away either. He looked at the briefcase beside his feet, at the laptop showing spreadsheets representing thousands of hours and hundreds of passengers whose complaints had been buried under settlements and NDAs. I can't walk away. I know that too. Just promise me you won't do anything stupid.
Define stupid, Rachel laughed. Short, sharp. You know exactly what I mean.
Don't let them make you angry. Angry people make mistakes.
I'm not angry.
Liar. But you're controlled, which is close enough. Call me when you know what's happening next.
I will. I love you.
I love you too. And Marcus, whatever you do to them, make sure it sticks.
The call ended. Marcus set phone down and allowed himself a moment to feel what he'd been holding back since Coleman first spoke. Not anger, exactly. Anger was hot and reactive and burned out before accomplishing anything. This was colder. This was watching a system reveal itself completely, stripping away pretense, exposing machinery underneath. He'd known this system existed, documented it, analyzed it, testified about it in congressional hearings where representatives nodded and did nothing. But knowing it and experiencing it were different. Now he had something no amount of data could replicate. A personal narrative that would force people to pay attention. A man in a suit approached, walking fast, phone in one hand, tablet in other. Mid-50s, graying temples. Posture suggesting years in boardrooms where authority was measured by stillness while delivering bad news. He stopped in front of Marcus, extended hand. Mr. Hayes, I'm Richard Brennan, Regional Operations Director for Transcontinental. I just heard about what happened. I want to apologize personally and assure you we take this extremely seriously. Marcus shook briefly. Thank you. Brennan sat without asking, angled toward Marcus in practiced engagement. I reviewed gate records and spoken with crew. Appears there was miscommunication regarding seat assignments. Situation escalated in a way that shouldn't have happened. We should have handled it better, and I want to make this right. How? Brennan shifted his tablet, screen displaying booking confirmation. First, personally confirming you on next flight with full upgrade to first class. Second, authorizing complete refund plus voucher worth $3,000. Third, arranging meeting with our executive team to discuss your experience and ensure we learn from it. Marcus glanced at tablet without touching. Mr. Brennan, did Captain Coleman file a report documenting the operational reason requiring my removal? Brennan's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes recalibrated. Captain Coleman filed standard incident report noting passenger non-compliance. What was I non-compliant about? According to the report, you refused crew instructions regarding seat reassignment. What was the operational reason for seat reassignment? Brennan hesitated. First crack in professional veneer. The report lists it as crew discretion. Crew discretion based on what specific operational necessity? Mr. Hayes, I understand you're upset. I'm not upset. I'm asking a factual question. What specific operational necessity required me to give up a seat I paid for? Brennan set tablet on lap, leaned forward slightly. Look, between you and me, sounds like there was a request from a VIP to accommodate a late passenger, and Coleman made a judgment call that probably wasn't the right one. It happens, but we can fix it. Let me fix it. Marcus met his eyes. A request from which VIP? I can't disclose that. Was it Jonathan Cole? Brennan's face went carefully neutral. Answer, enough. I can't comment on board member communications. So a board member called ahead to get his nephew a seat already occupied, and Coleman decided to remove me. Is that the miscommunication you're referring to? Brennan's tablet buzzed. He glanced at it. His diplomatic expression cracked into concern. Mr. Hayes, I really think we can resolve this more constructively in private conversation. If you'll come with me to the lounge, I'm filing a formal DOT complaint. Forms are already started. Brennan's professionalism cracked further. With all respect, formal complaint will drag this out for months, create negative publicity for everyone, and ultimately result in the same resolution I'm offering now. Why put yourself through that? Marcus reached into the briefcase, pulled out business card, handed it to Brennan. Simple. White cardstock, black text. Marcus Hayes, Commissioner for Civil Rights Compliance, U.S. Department of Transportation. Brennan stared. His face drained of color so completely, Marcus wondered if the man might faint. Tablet slipped from lap, clattered to the floor. He didn't reach for it. You're a federal commissioner? I am. For civil rights compliance? Correct. Brennan picked up tablet with shaking hands. Mr. Hayes, Commissioner Hayes, I apologize. I had no idea. You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me correctly. That's the point. Brennan stood abruptly, tablet clutched to chest like shield. I need to make some calls. Please, don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. He walked away fast, phone already at ear before he'd cleared 10 feet. Marcus watched him disappear around corner, then checked phone. 7:15. Pre-market trading had opened at 7, and the carnage was already visible. 3 texts from James. Harper's calling you in 5 minutes. Bloomberg picked it up. CNN wants comment. Marcus didn't respond. He pulled up Twitter, searched transcontinental. First result. Video with 4 million views posted 12 minutes ago. Caption. Black man calmly citing federal law gets dragged off plane while white kid gets his seat. This is America in 2024. The video showed everything. Coleman ordering him to move. Marcus asking for documentation. Evan shoving. Coleman grabbing phone. Security escort. Every moment captured from slightly different angles by passengers who'd sensed what they witnessed mattered. Comment section exactly what Marcus expected. Outrage, boycott calls, demands for accountability, and smaller but louder contingent insisting Marcus must have done something to deserve removal. That video didn't show the whole story. The people were too quick to assume racism. Marcus closed Twitter. Opened email. 47 new messages in 15 minutes. Most automated alerts from monitoring systems tracking media mentions of ongoing investigations. Subject lines. Transcontinental incident. Media inquiry, urgent. Stock movement alert. Congressional inquiry request. One stood out. Sender. Daniel Harper, CEO Transcontinental Airways. Subject line, blank. Marcus opened it. Commissioner Hayes, I just learned what happened on Flight 814. I am appalled and deeply sorry. I'm currently en route to O'Hare and should arrive within the hour. Please allow me the opportunity to speak with you in person. Daniel Harper. Timestamp, 7:12, 3 minutes ago. Harper's office was downtown Chicago, 15 miles from O'Hare in light traffic, 25 in rush hour. If he had left immediately after learning, he could be here by 8, maybe 7:45 with a driver willing to take risks. The fact he was coming at all meant someone understood how serious this was. Marcus's phone rang. Unknown number. DC area code. He answered. Commissioner Hayes, this is Special Agent Robert Williams, FBI Chicago Field Office. I understand there was an incident this morning involving potential federal civil rights violations. Are you still at O'Hare? I am, gate C-17. My partner and I are 15 minutes out. Can you remain there? Yes. Has anyone from the airline attempted to offer compensation or asked you to sign documents? Verbal offers. I haven't signed anything. Good. Don't. Agreements could complicate investigation. Pause. Commissioner, I reviewed video that's circulating. I need to ask directly. Did Captain Coleman or anyone else use physical force beyond what's visible in recording? Coleman grabbed my phone from my hand. On video. A passenger, Evan Cole, shoved my shoulder. Also on video. Security escorted me but didn't use force. I cooperated. Evan Cole. Relation to Jonathan Cole? Nephew, according to what I overheard. Another pause. Longer. Understood. We'll see you shortly. Call ended. Marcus set phone down, looked out window. Flight 814 was airborne now. Silver speck climbing into morning haze, carrying Coleman and Evan and 47 passengers who'd witnessed something they'd probably discuss for years. By the time it landed in San Diego, the world would have moved to the next outrage, the next viral moment, the next story that burned bright and faded fast. Unless Marcus made sure it didn't fade. His phone buzzed. Text from James. Stock at $118, down 7.4%. This is happening fast. Marcus opened browser. Pre-market data told the story. TCAI, $118.35, down 7.2% from $127.50 close. Pre-market volume, 2.1 million shares, already 4 times normal daily volume. Institutional investors were dumping. Algorithms were responding. The invisible hand of the market was delivering judgment faster than any federal investigation could. Marcus closed browser, opened Notes app, began typing. Documenting everything while fresh. Times, quotes, observations. The slight tremor in Jessica's hands when she'd offered voucher. The way Brennan's professionalism crumbled when he'd seen the business card. The calculation in Coleman's eyes when he'd grabbed the phone. Details mattered. In 6 months or a year, when this was argued in hearing rooms and courtrooms, these details would be the difference between settlement and genuine accountability. 2 people in dark suits approached from main terminal, moving with measured pace, law enforcement professionals who didn't need to hurry because they knew everyone would wait. Male, early 40s, black, close-cropped hair, solid build. Female, late 30s, white, auburn hair pulled back, eyes cataloging everything while revealing nothing. They stopped in front of Marcus, showed badges simultaneously. Commissioner Hayes? Special Agent Robert Williams. This is Special Agent Sarah Mitchell. We spoke on the phone? Marcus stood, shook both hands. Thank you for coming. Williams glanced around terminal, lingering crowd, news crew packing equipment. Jessica hovering near desk. Is there somewhere more private we can talk? There's a conference room, Jessica offered, voice tight. Just down the hall. We'll talk here. Marcus sat back down. Public space. Witnesses. I prefer transparency. Mitchell pulled out small notebook. Walk us through exactly what happened, starting from when you boarded. Marcus did. Clinical precision. The agents listened without interrupting, Mitchell taking shorthand notes, Williams watching Marcus's face with focused attention trained to detect deception. When Marcus finished, Williams leaned back. You mentioned Jonathan Cole by name. How did you know about his involvement? I overheard his nephew mention him, and when I asked the regional operations director, he didn't deny it. Mitchell flipped back through notes. Richard Brennan? Correct. Where is he now? Last I saw, making phone calls near Starbucks. Williams pulled out phone, sent text. We'll need to interview him. Coleman, the nephew. Anyone else involved? Pause. Commissioner, I have to ask. You've been investigating Transcontinental for discrimination. Some people might see this as convenient? A setup? Marcus kept voice level. I didn't plan this. I bought a ticket, showed up, sat in my assigned seat. Everything after that was their choice. But you knew Coleman had complaints against him. I knew the airline had a pattern. Coleman's name appeared in several, but I didn't know he'd be my captain until I boarded. Mitchell looked up. Did you identify yourself as federal commissioner at any point before removal? No. Why not? Because I wanted to see how they'd handle it. If I'd told them who I was, they would have treated me differently. Not because I deserved it, but because I had power to cause problems. That's exactly the issue I'm investigating. Williams and Mitchell exchanged glance, unspoken communication. Williams spoke carefully. Commissioner, your involvement complicates this investigation. Defense attorneys will argue entrapment, bias, personal vendetta. Let them. I have video showing everything I did and said. I cited federal regulations, asked for documentation, didn't raise my voice or make threats. The only people who behaved improperly were the ones who assumed I didn't belong and acted on that assumption. Commotion near terminal entrance drew attention. Daniel Harper appeared, flanked by two people in suits who had lawyer written over them. Harper, 52, fit, charcoal suit probably costing more than Marcus made in a month. Expression carefully controlled, but tension visible in shoulders, tightness around eyes. He walked straight to Marcus, extended hand. Commissioner Hayes, Daniel Harper. I cannot apologize enough for what happened this morning. Marcus shook briefly. Mr. Harper, these are FBI Special Agents Williams and Mitchell. They're conducting federal investigation into this morning's incident. Harper's composure cracked for half a second, then reset. He turned to agents. Of course. We'll cooperate fully. Whatever you need. Williams nodded. We'll be requesting crew records, passenger manifests, communication logs, documentation related to this flight, and Captain Coleman's employment history. You'll have everything by end of business today. Mitchell closed notebook. Mr. Harper, did you have knowledge of the incident before it became public? No. I learned when our PR team alerted me to video going viral. What time? Harper checked phone. 7:04. And you flew here immediately? I was planning to fly to San Diego this afternoon. When I heard, I redirected to O'Hare. Marcus watched this exchange with detached interest. Harper positioning himself, cooperative but careful, apologetic but controlled. Good at this. Decades managing crises and shareholders and regulatory inquiries taught him exactly how much to give and when to hold back. Williams handed Harper's a card. We'll be in touch. Meanwhile, Captain Coleman and crew members involved should be placed on administrative leave pending investigation outcome. Already done. And Jonathan Cole? Harper's expression hardened slightly. Mr. Cole is a board member. I don't have unilateral authority. Then I suggest you call the emergency board meeting. Williams's tone remained professional, but steel underneath. Because if we find evidence he used position to influence crew decisions for personal benefit, he's going to have bigger problems than keeping his board seat. Harper nodded slowly. Understood. Agents stepped away to make calls, leaving Marcus alone with Harper and his lawyer. Harper sat in chair Brennan had vacated, careful to maintain respectful distance. Commissioner Hayes, I want you to know what happened this morning does not represent Transcontinental's values or how we train our people. This was failure at every level, and I take full responsibility. Marcus met his eyes. Mr. Harper, I've been investigating your airline for 2 years. I have data showing 847 incidents of questionable seat reassignments. This wasn't failure. This was your system working exactly as designed. Harper went very still. I wasn't aware of any investigation. You weren't supposed to be. It was preliminary. But it's not preliminary anymore. One of Harper's lawyers leaned forward. Commissioner, perhaps we should discuss this in a more private setting. No. Marcus kept attention on Harper. Here's what's going to happen. FBI will conduct criminal investigation. I'm recommending DOT open formal civil rights compliance audit of your entire operation. Congress will probably want hearings, and your stock will keep dropping until investors believe you're serious about fixing the culture that created this problem. Harper's face had gone pale. What do you want? I want what every passenger deserves. Respect, transparency, accountability, and I want it codified in systems that can't be bypassed next time someone with money or connections decides they deserve something more than the person sitting next to them. We can do that. Then prove it. Harper stood, composed despite everything, extended hand again. You have my word we will cooperate fully with every aspect of every investigation, and we will implement whatever changes are necessary to ensure this never happens again. Marcus shook his hand, but said nothing. Words were easy. Systems were hard. He'd believe it when he saw documentation. Harper and lawyers walked away, conferring in low voices. Agent Williams returned, phone in hand. Commissioner, we have enough for now. We'll need formal statement later, but you're free to go. Do you need us to arrange transportation? No, I'll rent a car and drive to San Diego. That's 8 hours. I have time. Mitchell handed him her card. Call if you remember anything else, or if anyone from the airline contacts you. Marcus took card and stood, slung briefcase over shoulder. Phone buzzed. Text from James. You're trending #1 on Twitter. Also, Harper just called the secretary. This is happening fast. Marcus walked toward rental car desk, passing travelers who stared because they'd seen video or news interview, or both. He kept expression neutral, pace steady, just another passenger navigating an airport on Saturday morning. But inside, something had shifted. For 2 years he'd fought this battle, through memos and meetings and procedures that moved with glacial slowness. Now the battle had found him, and it was moving at the speed of digital outrage and market panic and federal law enforcement. He'd spent his career trying to change systems from inside their machinery. Now he was going to dismantle one from outside, using the tools they'd given him when they decided he didn't deserve the seat he'd paid for. The rental car was a Nissan Altima, silver, anonymous. He threw his briefcase into passenger seat and pulled onto Kennedy Expressway, merging into westbound traffic. Dashboard clock read 8:12. Flight 814 had been airborne for 43 minutes. He drove in silence, radio off, windows cracked. Highway stretched ahead. Concrete barriers weathered gray. Exit signs announcing suburbs. Billboards advertising injury lawyers and storage units. Everything looked exactly as it always did, which felt strange given that his phone, sitting in cup holder, was vibrating every 30 seconds with notifications he wasn't ready to read. He drove west into afternoon sun. Headlights would come later. Miles passing. The knowledge that what he'd started in seat 3A was already spreading beyond his control into courtrooms and boardrooms and newsrooms, where people were making decisions that would ripple through the industry for years. Marcus Hayes was carrying something that would change an industry, and every mile brought him closer to the moment when he'd deliver it. The silver Altima crossed into Iowa as afternoon surrendered to dusk, the sun bleeding orange and crimson across fields that stretched unbroken to the horizon. Marcus drove with windows cracked, letting highway wind carry away the stale, recycled air of airports and confrontations. His phone sat silent in the cup holder now, the initial tsunami of notifications having crested and receded into a manageable tide. He'd spoken to Rachel again at a rest stop outside Des Moines. Brief, functional. She'd asked if he was okay. He'd said yes, and meant it in the way that truth sometimes requires careful definition. He wasn't hurt, wasn't afraid, wasn't uncertain about what came next. But he also wasn't unchanged, and Rachel had heard that in the silences between his words. Drive careful. Don't push yourself. The world will still be broken when you wake up tomorrow. I know. Do you? Because you sound like a man who thinks if he stops moving, something important will slip away.
Marcus had looked out across the parking lot where families stretched legs and argued over snacks and navigated the small frictions of being confined together in metal boxes for hours. Normal life continuing in blissful ignorance of the tectonic shift happening in boardrooms and federal offices hundreds of miles away. I just need to keep moving right now. Rachel had sighed, the sound carrying more understanding than resignation. Then move. But promise me you'll stop if you get tired. I promise. She'd known it was a lie. He'd known she knew. The call had ended with I love yous that carried the weight of 22 years learning when to push and when to let go. Now, 6 hours deeper into the drive, fatigue settled into his shoulders and spine. Not the kind sleep would cure, the kind that came from knowing what he'd set in motion couldn't be stopped. He was committed now in ways that went beyond professional obligation. This had become personal the moment Coleman's words, people like you, had crystallized every assumption Marcus had spent his career documenting. His phone lit up. Text from James. Transcontinental released official statement. It's actually good. They're accepting responsibility and committing to immediate reforms. Someone over there understands how bad this is. Marcus pulled over at the next rest area and opened the link James had sent. The statement was short, direct, stripped of corporate evasion. Today, Transcontinental Airways failed Marcus Hayes and failed the values we claim to uphold. Captain Richard Coleman removed Commissioner Hayes from his confirmed seat without documented operational necessity, in violation of federal regulations and basic human dignity. We have suspended Captain Coleman pending investigation. We have placed Regional Operations Director Richard Brennan on administrative leave. We are requesting the immediate resignation of board member Jonathan Cole. We are implementing a complete review of all crew discretion policies, effective immediately. We are creating an independent passenger rights office reporting directly to the Department of Transportation. We will cooperate fully with all federal investigations. An apology is not enough. Reform is not optional. We are committed to becoming the airline we should have been all along. Marcus read it twice. The statement was smart. It preempted the enforcement actions he would have recommended anyway. It put distance between the company and the individuals involved. It signaled to investors that leadership understood the magnitude of the crisis and was acting decisively. But statements were performative until they became procedural. Marcus had seen too many companies promise reform in the heat of scandal, only to quietly roll back changes once attention faded. The test wouldn't be what they said today. It would be what their data showed in 6 months. He typed back to James. Good first step. We'll verify implementation. Don't let up pressure. Already drafting formal investigation notice. DOT secretary wants to brief you Monday morning. Tell her I'll be there. Marcus set the phone down and stared through the windshield at the rest area where sodium lights were flickering to life against the gathering dark. A family walked past, 2 children racing ahead while parents followed with the exhausted patience of people who'd been traveling too long. The normalcy of it felt distant, like watching life through glass. His phone rang. Unknown number. California area code. Marcus Hayes. Commissioner Hayes, this is Congresswoman Elena Martinez.
ranking member on transportation and infrastructure. Do you have a moment? Marcus straightened slightly. Martinez had been one of the few members of Congress who'd actually read the reports he'd submitted over the years. She'd asked intelligent questions in hearings, followed up with staff, understood that most regulatory problems weren't mysteries requiring investigation. They were known issues requiring political will. Congresswoman, I just watched your interview from O'Hare. I'm calling an emergency hearing on airline passenger rights and crew discretion practices. 2 weeks, maybe sooner if we can arrange it. I'd like you to testify. I'll need to coordinate with FBI. I'm a fact witness now. I understand. But Commissioner, this is our moment. We've been trying to pass meaningful passenger protection legislation for years, and it always dies in committee because airlines lobby hard and the public doesn't stay focused long enough to force action. This time is different. You made it personal. You made it visible. If you're willing to help us build a legislative record, we can turn what happened to you into protection for millions of passengers. Marcus chose his words carefully. Congresswoman, I appreciate the opportunity, but I need it to be substantive, not performative. I've sat through too many hearings where everyone nods sympathetically and nothing changes. Martinez laughed, short and sharp. Commissioner, I've been in Congress 12 years. I know the difference between theater and legislation. This will be the latter. You have my word. Then I'll testify. Coordinate through my office. Thank you. And Commissioner, for what it's worth, what you did this morning took courage. Most people would have taken the voucher and walked away. Most people don't have the resources I have to fight back. That's the problem we're trying to fix. Agreed. That's exactly why we need your testimony. The call ended. Marcus sat in the idling car, watching the family load back into their minivan, the children still full of energy despite the hour. The parents looked worn but content, the kind of tired that came from manageable challenges rather than systemic injustice. He wondered how many of them had ever been told they didn't belong somewhere. How many had learned to accept it as the cost of navigating a world where authority was unevenly distributed and accountability optional. Marcus pulled back onto the highway and drove on through the darkness, headlights cutting tunnels through the night. 6 days later, Transcontinental Headquarters. The emergency board meeting convened at 7 a.m. in a conference room that smelled of expensive coffee and quiet desperation. 8 board members sat around a table designed to project authority through sheer mass, Brazilian walnut, 18 feet long, polished to mirror brightness. The chair at the head remained conspicuously empty, Jonathan Cole's seat. Daniel Harper stood at the far end, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking like a man who hadn't slept more than 3 hours in any night since Saturday. The bags under his eyes told the story his professional demeanor tried to hide. I'm not going to waste time with pleasantries. Our stock is down 14% since the incident. We've lost $2.1 billion in market capitalization. Institutional investors are calling for immediate leadership changes. 3 major pension funds have announced reviews of their positions. We're facing a federal civil rights investigation, an FBI criminal probe, and a congressional hearing in 10 days. Legal estimates our total liability at somewhere between $500 million and $2 billion, depending on how broadly the investigation extends. He paused, letting the numbers settle. Board member Patricia Holt, 68, former Secretary of Commerce, spoke first. Dan, we all saw the statement you released. It was aggressive. Some might say too aggressive. You committed us to reforms before legal had a chance to assess. Legal doesn't get to decide anymore, Patricia. The market decided. The public decided. We can either get ahead of this or get buried by it. Another board member, Thomas Brennan, no relation to Richard, leaned forward. What's the status of Coleman and the others? Coleman's been terminated for cause. His union filed grievance, but our attorneys are confident it won't stand, given the video evidence and the federal investigation. Richard Brennan resigned yesterday. Emily Watson, the flight attendant, has been cleared of wrongdoing, but is receiving additional training. The other crew members are being reviewed individually. And Jonathan? Harper's expression went flat. Jonathan has refused to resign voluntarily. Which brings us to the reason for this meeting. I'm calling for an emergency vote to remove him from the board under our bylaws, Section 12, Clause 4, conduct detrimental to the reputation and interests of the company. Silence. The kind that preceded decisions people knew would define them. Patricia spoke again, carefully. Dan, Jonathan has been with this company for 15 years. He's raised significant capital, maintained important relationships. He used his position to pressure a captain into removing a federal official from a flight to give his nephew that seat. That federal official happened to be investigating us for exactly this kind of abuse. Jonathan's conduct didn't just create legal liability. It validated every complaint Commissioner Hayes has been documenting for 2 years. Do we know for certain Jonathan knew Hayes was investigating us? It doesn't matter what he knew. What matters is what he did. And what he did was use his authority to benefit family at another passenger's expense, which is exactly the pattern Hayes has been tracking. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. I assume we're all aware that if we establish this precedent, we're essentially admitting systemic cultural problems. Every plaintiff's attorney in the country is going to use this vote as evidence. Harper's voice didn't rise, but it hardened. Thomas, we don't have the luxury of pretending anymore. The evidence exists. The patterns exist. We can acknowledge it and fix it, or we can deny it and watch the company collapse under the weight of lawsuits and regulatory enforcement. I know which one I'm choosing. Another board member, the youngest at 42, cleared his throat. I move to remove Jonathan Cole from the board, effective immediately. Second. Harper looked around the table. All in favor? 8 hands rose, slowly at first, then with gathering momentum as each member made the calculation and arrived at the same conclusion. Motion carries unanimously. Jonathan Cole is removed from the board. Patricia, would you notify him? Patricia nodded, looking older than she had 15 minutes earlier. Harper gathered his papers. One more thing. I'm recommending we create a vice president position for passenger experience and civil rights, reporting directly to me, with authority to override any crew decision that lacks documented operational necessity. I want that position filled within 30 days. I want every crew member retrained within 90 days. And I want quarterly reports to DOT showing our compliance with the consent order we're going to negotiate. We haven't negotiated a consent order yet. We will, and when we do, I want to be able to show we were already implementing changes before we were forced to. That's the only way we survive this. The meeting ended. Board members filed out in silence, each carrying the weight of firing one of their own to save themselves. The reforms happened fast. Within 6 days, new policies were drafted. Within 6 weeks, training had begun. Within 6 months, the industry had fundamentally changed. But for the individuals caught in the machinery, 6 months felt like a lifetime. Jester. 6 months later, Richard Coleman, Schaumburg, Illinois. Richard Coleman sat at his kitchen table in a house that felt too big now that his wife had moved to her sister's place in Wisconsin. The separation wasn't official yet. Nancy had been careful with her words. I need space to think. The media attention is overwhelming. I can't be here right now. But Coleman knew what space to think meant. It meant she was calculating whether staying married to him was worth the social cost. Their daughter hadn't called in 4 days. Friends had stopped responding to texts. The neighborhood had gone quiet in that particular way that told you people were talking about you behind closed doors. His phone sat on the table, screen dark. He'd turned off notifications 3 days ago after the 100th message from reporters, former colleagues, strangers who'd seen the video and had opinions about what kind of person he was. The termination letter had arrived by courier yesterday, effective immediately. No severance. Cause specified. Violation of federal passenger rights regulations, misuse of crew authority, battery, theft of passenger property, and conduct inconsistent with company values. 30 years. Gone in a paragraph. His pilot's license suspension notice had come from the FAA the day before. Minimum 6 months pending investigation. Possible permanent revocation if criminal charges resulted in conviction. He'd flown his first solo at 17, had dreamed of nothing but aviation since he was 8 years old, watching planes climb out of O'Hare. Had worked 2 jobs to pay for flight school. Had started as a regional pilot making $22,000 a year. Had worked his way up through dedication and skill and thousands of hours in cockpits of progressively larger aircraft. All of it erased because he'd made an assumption about a man in a hoodie. Coleman stood and walked to the window overlooking his backyard. The grass needed mowing. Nancy had always handled that, or hired someone. He couldn't remember which told him something about how checked out he'd been from the actual operation of the life he'd been living. His laptop was open on the counter, browser showing news articles he couldn't stop reading despite knowing they'd only make him feel worse. Former pilot fired after viral discrimination incident. Federal commissioner details pattern of airline bias in congressional testimony. Transcontinental stock continues decline amid investigation. And the one that had been published that morning, DOT announces industry-wide audit of crew discretion. Practices. Coleman closed the laptop, walked to the garage, got in his car, the Lexus he'd bought to celebrate making senior captain, and drove aimlessly through suburbs that all looked the same. He ended up at a Home Depot 40 minutes away where nobody knew him. Walked the aisles looking at tools and building materials and things that represented the possibility of making something instead of destroying it. A manager approached. "Can I help you find anything?" Coleman started to say no, then stopped. "Are you hiring?" The manager blinked, surprised. "Yeah, actually. Lumber department, $16.50 an hour to start. You have retail experience?" "No, but I'm a fast learner and I need a job." The manager studied him, trying to place something familiar. "Don't I know you from somewhere?" Coleman felt his chest tighten. "I don't think so." "You sure? You look really familiar." "I have one of those faces." "About the job?" The manager pulled out his phone, opened an application. "Fill this out. We're doing interviews next week." Coleman took the phone, started typing. When he reached the field for previous employer, his fingers hovered over the keyboard. Transcontinental Airways. Pilot. 30 years. He deleted it, wrote instead, self-employed consultant. The lie felt small compared to everything else. Evan Cole, Miami, Florida. Evan Cole stood behind the velvet rope at Club 11, watching people he didn't know line up to get into a place that would forget them by morning. His job was to smile, check names against the list on his iPad, make quick decisions about who looked cool enough to enhance the vibe and who didn't. It paid $38,000 a year, plus tips if he was friendly enough to the promoters who hired him. 6 months ago, he'd been making $220,000 as a luxury real estate agent in Chicago, closing deals on properties he'd never be able to afford himself, but had learned to discuss as if he understood what it meant to casually spend $8 million on a condo. That felt like a different life, a different person. The criminal case had been resolved in March with a guilty plea to misdemeanor battery. His attorney had negotiated it down from the federal charges that could have sent him to prison. 12 months probation, 300 hours community service, anger management classes, a criminal record that would appear on background checks for the rest of his life. The civil settlement had cost his parents $400,000. Marcus Hayes had donated every cent to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Evan had seen the press release, had understood the message. "Your money means nothing to me. Your punishment is living with what you did. Evan checked his phone during a lull in the line. Instagram showed him ghost towns where there used to be engagement. He'd lost 11,000 followers. The ones who remained were mostly people who didn't know or didn't care about what had happened. Strangers, bots, digital tumbleweeds. His ex-girlfriend had gotten engaged 2 weeks ago. He'd seen the announcement, had felt nothing, which surprised him until he realized he'd been feeling nothing about most things for months. A woman approached the rope, early 20s, dressed like she'd spent 6 hours getting ready to look like she'd thrown something on casually. "I'm on the list. Ashley Morrison, +3. Evan checked. She wasn't on the list. "Sorry, I don't see you here." "Are you serious? I was told I was on the list." "Who told you?" "Does it matter? Just let me in." Evan felt the familiar spike of irritation, the assumption that rules didn't apply, the certainty that enough indignation would wear down whoever stood between her and what she wanted. He'd been that person 6 months ago. He recognized the entitlement because he'd perfected it. "I can't let you in without confirmation. Do you have a text or email from the promoter?" "I'm not showing you my phone. Do you know who my dad is?" Evan looked at her. Really looked. Saw himself reflected in her posture, her tone, her absolute confidence that status mattered more than rules. "I don't know who your dad is, and it doesn't matter. You're not on the list." Ashley's face flushed. "This is ridiculous. I'm going to talk to your manager." "Feel free." She stormed off. Evan watched her go and felt something close to satisfaction. Small, petty, but real. His phone buzzed. Text from his mom. "Your father and I would like you to come home for Thanksgiving. We miss you." Evan typed back, "I'll think about it." He wouldn't go. Couldn't face the careful conversations where everyone pretended the past 6 months hadn't happened, where his parents tried to be supportive while secretly calculating how much his scandal had cost them in social capital and actual capital. His dad had lost his board seat, had faced federal investigation, had paid nearly $2 million in legal fees and settlements, had declared bankruptcy to discharge the debts, and all of it traced back to a phone call asking a friend to hold a plane for a nephew running late. Evan checked the line again. A couple in their 30s approached, well-dressed, confident without being aggressive. "We're on the list. Martinez, +1. Evan found them. "You're good. Enjoy your night." They thanked him and went inside. Evan watched the door close behind them and wondered what it was like to move through the world without constantly calculating whether people recognized you as the guy from the video. Jonathan Cole, Federal Prison, Terre Haute, Indiana. Jonathan Cole woke at 5:30 to the sound of metal doors unlocking in sequence down the cell block. The rhythm was precise, automated, indifferent to whether anyone inside those cells was ready for another day of acknowledging they'd destroyed their lives through stupidity and arrogance. He sat up on the thin mattress that had replaced the king-sized bed he'd slept in for 23 years. His cellmate, a 30-year-old drug dealer named Marcus, different Marcus, wrong Marcus, the universe's small joke, was already up, doing push-ups in the 3 feet of clear floor space their cell offered. "You want breakfast, or you sleeping through?" Jonathan swung his legs over the side of the bunk. "I'm up." "Smart. Kitchen detail's better than sitting in here thinking about your life choices." Kitchen detail meant 4 hours of washing dishes, mopping floors, and serving food to men who'd committed crimes ranging from white-collar fraud to violent assault. Jonathan had been assigned there because someone in classification had decided he wasn't a physical threat and could benefit from the humility of service work. They'd been right about the humility, wrong about the benefit. He'd been sentenced to 18 months for conspiracy to commit civil rights violations and abuse of corporate position. Could have been worse. His attorneys had negotiated a plea that avoided the more serious charges that carried 5-year minimums. The sentencing judge had been blunt. "Mr. Cole, you used power not to help others, but to benefit yourself at their expense. That violates the basic social contract. 18 months is lenient given the harm you caused." Jonathan had wanted to argue, wanted to explain that he'd just been helping his nephew, that he hadn't meant for anyone to get hurt, that if he'd known Marcus Hayes was a federal commissioner investigating the airline, he never would have called Coleman. But his attorney had squeezed his arm hard enough to leave a bruise, and Jonathan had said nothing. His divorce had been finalized 3 months into his sentence. His ex-wife had taken the house, the investments, the vacation property in Aspen. Jonathan had been left with legal debts exceeding $1.4 million and a bankruptcy filing that would follow him for a decade. His daughter had visited once, had sat across from him in the visitation room with tears streaming down her face, and said, "I changed my name, Dad. I'm not a Cole anymore. I can't be." He'd wanted to tell her he understood, wanted to say he didn't blame her, but the words had stuck in his throat, and she'd left after 20 minutes and hadn't come back. Now, 6 months in, with 12 months remaining, Jonathan moved through the routine with the mechanical precision of someone who'd learned that thinking too much about the future made the present unbearable. He washed dishes while news played on a small TV mounted in the corner of the kitchen. The sound was low, but he could read the captions. "Airline Passenger Rights Act passes Senate with bipartisan support. New regulations require documented operational necessity for all seat reassignments. Transcontinental Airways reports 34% reduction in passenger complaints after policy overhaul." And the one that made Jonathan's hands still in the soapy water: Commissioner Hayes promoted to Senior Director of Aviation Civil Rights Enforcement. The man whose seat his nephew had taken. The man Jonathan had inadvertently helped remove from a flight. The man who'd used that incident to reshape an entire industry. That man was thriving while Jonathan scrubbed dried eggs off institutional plates in a federal prison kitchen. The universe had a sense of humor. It just wasn't funny. Marcus Hayes, 6 months later. The conference room at the Department of Transportation headquarters was packed. Standing room only. Journalists, airline executives, consumer advocates, congressional staffers. Everyone who'd been following the case since that Saturday morning in March. Marcus stood at the podium, notes in front of him, though he didn't need them. He'd given versions of this presentation 17 times in the past 6 months. But this one was different. This one marked the formal conclusion of the investigation and the implementation of new federal standards. 6 months ago, I was removed from Transcontinental Airways Flight 814 for refusing to give up my confirmed seat without documented operational necessity. What happened to me was not unique. It was part of a pattern affecting hundreds of passengers annually across multiple carriers. The investigation that followed revealed systemic failures in how airlines exercised crew discretion, how they resolved passenger complaints, and how they balanced operational flexibility with passenger rights. He clicked to the next slide. Data charts showing complaint trends before and after the new regulations. Since the implementation of mandatory documentation requirements and independent oversight, discriminatory seat reassignments have decreased 71% across the industry. Passenger satisfaction with complaint resolution has increased 44%. Airlines have reported that while the new procedures require additional documentation time, the reduction in legal liability and reputational risk far outweighs the administrative burden. A reporter raised her hand. Marcus nodded. Commissioner Hayes, critics say the new regulations impose excessive costs on airlines and reduce their operational flexibility. What's your response? Marcus looked directly at her. The cost of documentation is minimal compared to the cost of discrimination. And flexibility without accountability isn't flexibility. It's permission to treat people unequally based on assumptions about who deserves respect. Another hand. What about Captain Coleman? Some people feel his punishment was excessive for what they characterize as a judgment error. Marcus had been asked this question in various forms dozens of times. His answer never changed. Captain Coleman made a series of decisions. He ordered me to move without documented cause. He refused to provide explanation when asked. He called security when I requested documentation. He grabbed my phone when I tried to record. Each of those decisions was a choice. Choices have consequences. The fact that he'd made similar decisions for years without facing consequences doesn't mean the consequences were unjust when they finally arrived. The room was silent. Marcus let it sit for a moment before continuing. But this was never about punishing individuals. It was about changing systems. Coleman, Jonathan Cole, Evan Cole, they're symptoms, not causes. The cause was a culture that allowed discretion without oversight, that valued convenience over equity, that assumed certain passengers mattered less than others. That culture is what we've worked to change. He clicked to the final slide. A single sentence. Respect is not discretionary. It is mandatory. The presentation ended. Reporters rushed forward with follow-up questions. Marcus answered a few, then excused himself and walked to his office 3 floors up. The office was modest. He'd refused the larger space offered with his promotion. Same Toyota Camry in the parking garage, same canvas briefcase, same philosophy that position didn't require display. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Rachel. He called back. Hey, sorry, just finished the press conference. I watched the live stream. You were good. Tough, but fair. Thanks. How was your day? 2 parent-teacher conferences and a faculty meeting about standardized testing. So basically, the education equivalent of airline regulations. Marcus laughed. First genuine laugh all day. You coming home for dinner? Already in the car. David called earlier. He's flying in for Thanksgiving. Says he wants to hear the whole story without cameras around. It's not that interesting. Liar. You changed an industry. That's interesting. Marcus looked out his window at the city below. Traffic flowing in patterns. People moving through their lives. Most of them completely unaware that the rules governing how they could be treated when they flew had fundamentally changed 6 months ago. I just refused to move. You did more than that, and you know it. But I love that you can't see it. Keeps you humble. Someone has to keep me humble. That's my job. See you in an hour. Love you. Love you too. Marcus set down the phone and pulled up his email. 417 new messages since the press conference had started. He'd read them later. Right now, he wanted to look at something else. He opened a folder labeled Flight 814, Personal. Inside were photos he'd taken at various points over the past 6 months. Coleman's termination notice, the congressional hearing where he'd testified, the moment the Airline Passenger Rights Act had passed the Senate, newspaper articles tracking Transcontinental's transformation, an email from Emily Watson thanking him for clearing her of wrongdoing and inspiring her to pursue a career in aviation compliance, and at the bottom, a scan of the boarding pass from that Saturday morning. Seat 3A, the seat that had started everything. Marcus closed the folder, gathered his briefcase, turned off the lights, and walked to the elevator. In the parking garage, a young black man was getting out of his car nearby. He looked at Marcus, did a double take, then approached hesitantly. Excuse me, are you Marcus Hayes? Marcus nodded. Yes? I just wanted to say thank you. I fly a lot for work, business class. I used to get looks, sometimes comments. After what you did, after the new rules, it's different now. People don't question whether I belong. Marcus shook his hand. You always belonged. Now they just have to acknowledge it. The young man smiled, thanked him again, and walked toward the building. Marcus got in the Camry, adjusted the mirrors, pulled out of the garage onto streets busy with evening traffic. His phone buzzed. Text from James. WSJ wants interview about industry compliance 6 months out. Worth doing? Marcus typed back. Only if they focus on systems, not me. You know they're going to focus on you. Then let them ask the questions and I'll answer the way I want. That's my commissioner. See you Monday. Marcus drove through familiar streets toward the house where Rachel would be waiting, where dinner would be normal and conversations would range across everything except the thing that had defined the past 6 months. He thought about Coleman in Iowa stocking shelves, about Evan in Miami checking names at a nightclub, about Jonathan in federal prison washing dishes. Not satisfaction, something more complex. Systems perpetuated by individuals only changed when individuals faced genuine consequences. That wasn't cruelty. That was architecture. That accountability, however harsh, was necessary for transformation. But he also understood that their punishment hadn't been the point. The point had been preventing the next passenger from being told they didn't belong. The point had been codifying respect into procedure so it couldn't be withdrawn at whim. The point had been changing the architecture of power. And by that measure, sitting in seat 3A and refusing to move had accomplished more than 2 years of regulatory filings ever could. Marcus pulled into his driveway. Rachel's car was already there, lights on inside the house. He sat for a moment in the gathering dark, feeling the weight of 6 months settle into something manageable. He'd started the day being told to move. He'd ended it by making sure no one else would be told the same thing without cause, without documentation, without accountability. If discrimination had been convenient because it cost nothing, it would continue indefinitely. But if discrimination cost companies billions in market value, cost individuals their careers and freedom, cost systems their legitimacy, then maybe, slowly, it would become too expensive to sustain. Marcus got out of the car, walked to the front door, went inside where Rachel was setting the table and dinner was waiting, and life continued in all the ordinary ways that mattered most. The briefcase went by the door, the hoodie onto the back of a chair. The man who'd changed an industry sat down to eat dinner with his wife and talk about their son's flight plans and whether the gutters needed cleaning before winter. And somewhere in America, a passenger boarded a plane, sat in their assigned seat, and wasn't asked to move because someone more important wanted it. Marcus never knew their name, but they were the reason he'd refused to stand up. And they were the reason the system had finally been forced to sit down. 1 year later, Gate C-17 looked the same. Same desk, same windows. Marcus boarded Flight 816 to San Diego. Seat 3A. Captain Alicia Dean's voice over. PA. Good morning, this is Captain Dean. Welcome aboard. We're cleared for departure in 5 minutes. The flight attendant approached. Welcome, Mr. Hayes. Can I get you anything? Water, please. Thank you, Jennifer. A man sat in 3B, mid-40s, suit. He glanced at Marcus, recognition flickering. You're Marcus Hayes, Aviation Compliance, Delta. What you did, it changed everything. Marcus nodded. Made doing the right thing easier. That's all that mattered. The plane lifted into clear blue sky. Marcus opened his laptop. Presentation title. From Incident to Industry Change. But the real title was simpler. What happens when someone says no? He'd said no to moving, no to the voucher, no to silence. That refusal had cascaded through boardrooms and courtrooms until power itself had been forced to recalibrate. Not because he was special, because he was right. The plane descended into San Diego. This time, he made it. And somewhere in America, a passenger sat in their assigned seat and wasn't asked to move because someone more connected wanted it. Marcus never knew their name, but they were the reason he'd refused to stand. And that felt like victory.